Okay, can everybody see? Is this too small? A little bigger? Okay. So, what is an array? In simplest terms, an array is basically a data type that can hold multiple values in a list form, in an order form. Okay? How do I make an array? That is an array. Open and closed square brackets is how you make an array. This array has absolutely nothing in it, okay? But that is the syntax for arrays. Have I lost anybody yet? I hope not. So, when I say that lists can hold things, I mean that they can literally hold anything. They can hold numbers and strings and booleans and functions and arrays and objects. Anything. Arrays can hold anything. So if I do like let numbers equal 1, 2, 3, 4, and I could console.log numbers. What do I get? I get an array of numbers. Arrays, like strings, have indexes, and like strings, the first index is 0. Okay, so numbers at 0 is 1. Numbers at 1 is 2. Okay, and at each index, it's separated by a comma. Does that make sense to everybody? This isn't too difficult to understand, right? And like strings as well, these are iterable things. So you can loop through them, access each thing at the whatever I is at that point, and you can get every index of the array. So, also, we can have strings, right? So let hobbits. I like Lord of the Rings. So we have Frodo, and we have Sam. Whoop. And we have Merry. And we have Pippin, right? So if you console log hobbits, you get the array of hobbits. Strings and numbers, both. So if I have let a bunch of stuff, I can have 100, I can have false, I can have undefined in here, I can have another array with the word hello in it, I can have this is an object. We'll learn about that on Wednesday. An object is just curly braces, but I could have that in an array as well. And I could also have hobbits, a variable, right? So if I console log bunch of stuff, this is what I get. 100 false undefined in another array, hello, an empty object, and that array I made before, hobbits. Any questions? Makes sense, right? Any data type can be stored in an array, and they're all in order. If I go in my code, I don't touch a bunch of stuff, I'm doing other things, and then I try to access a bunch of stuff later, it is always going to be in this order. Arrays are ordered lists. Okay? Cool? So, if I say console.log type of hobbits. Hobbits is Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, right? So what is it going to be in the console? It is going to be object. So this is a little confusing. Arrays are actually objects, okay? So we could put object literals with the curly braces and arrays with the square brackets are clearly different things, right? So how can we actually check and see if if you have an object in an array, how can you see what type it is? Because we usually type up to see if it's a number or a string or a Boolean, right? So how can we see? This is where this comes in. Instead of doing this, I'll comment this out so you guys can see it later. And I'll do this. Instead of doing this, we can console.log the global array object. Just like string, just like number, just like Boolean, there is also a global array object. I briefly showed you this last week. And on this global array object, there is a property that says, well, there's a method that says .isArray. And you could pass that anything. And it will literally say true or false, is this an array? Hobbits. And it will literally tell you, give you a Boolean value if the thing you're passing it is an array or not. So hobbits is an array, so it says true. If I make this a string of hobbits, so this is just a single value, it will say false. Does this make sense? Array is array, pass it thing you want to see, right? Not too bad. Okay. Is there any questions so far? Yes. No. So there is something, like let's say, I will show you this, although you don't really have to know this. You could say global array dot from, and you could pass it hobbits. And if you console.log this, you get this. Does everyone see? It literally took the string and made each character a different index in this array. However, if you pass this true, you will get a blank array. If you pass this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you get a blank array. The reason this is because array.from actually makes an array from something that is iterable, meaning something that has indexes, something you can loop through, okay? You can't loop through numbers, you can't loop through Booleans, but you can loop through strings. So you can do this like this if you want to. Cool? Any other questions? Nah? So basically, like array.from basically iterates through the thing you're passing it. There are other things that you could pass to this. Well, I'll just use strings since like you don't have to know about anything else right now. And it basically takes each thing and puts it into an empty array and returns that new array. Bless you. Does that make sense? You don't really have to know how it works, but just know that this is a thing. You don't even really have to use that, because there is another way to make something, to make a string an array, in a more with. I'll tell you guys about that method tomorrow. That's part of tomorrow's lecture. It's called the split method. I'll tell you about that tomorrow. Actually, I'll show you. No, I'm just kidding. So that's that. And just like a string, do you remember how like if we had let my string equal hobbits, and we said console.log my string of 2, we would get the thing at that index, right? The character at that index. 0, 1, 2, we got the first B, right? And that's returned over here, right? It's consoled over here, right? The same thing can be said with arrays. So if we take my hobbits and we say let the real hero equal hobbits of 1, and then we console.log the real hero, we get Sam. Does that make sense? It's just like strings. 0th index is the first thing in that array. And then you go on and on and on. And just like strings, the dot length property can return the length of the array. So if we were to say console.log hobbits.length, we would get 4. And just like strings, there is no 4th index, right? The length is 4, but the last index is index 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. So if you try to access hobbits at 4, you would get undefined, just like a string. Okay? Any questions on that? Any questions on accessing elements in an array? It's literally the same as strings. It's crazy. No questions? Sure? Okay. So what would so there is another thing that you can do in arrays that you can't do with strings. So let's say I had a string like let my string equal to Sam. And I say my string at 1, so this A is now going to be equal to E. What do you think my string will be equal to? Really? No. You can't do that with strings. However, you can do that with arrays. Let me show you what I mean. So arrays are complex data types, okay? That means they can be mutated. Primitive data types, primitive values, cannot be mutated. And this is what I mean by mutation. Trying to take something that is, change one part and change what it was originally as well. So like I can console.log this, I can set another variable equal to my string at 1. You can get this value, but you can't change what it was. So basically, primitive versus complex, you can mutate these values. So we have hobbits, right? So we could say hobbits at 3 is now going to be equal, going to get rid of Pippin, and we're going to say he's going to be equal to Smeagol. Smeagol's a hobbit. Oh, whoops. And then we could console.log hobbits, and we get Frodo, Sam, Merry, Smeagol. Does that make sense? I'm actually changing what that is. I'm changing what is inside of the array. And this is possible, okay? And it's also dangerous and frowned upon to not mutate your original data. Because you don't know what else you're going to be using. You don't know what else you're going to be writing in, like, later on functions, or later on anything else that could be referencing the same data. Okay? Yeah? It's frowned upon to mutate data. Pretty much, yeah. You don't really, I mean, like, yeah. Yeah. But I'm just telling you it's possible. Like, let's say you are given a question in an interview to, like, take this array and return an array that does this. And you can do it in place. That is fine to do. Like, you know, like, you don't want to, what I'm saying is you don't want to mutate data, like, if you're making an application and you're getting a lot of data from the back end, right? You're getting a lot of data, a lot of personal information. And it's like thousands and thousands of indexes in an array, right? You don't want to change what something is in that master array. You want to make a copy of that array and then change that This is fine though, because also like in solving problems and algorithms, if you can, let's say you got a question that was like reverse an array, it saves space to just do it in place rather than to make a new array and put everything into it the other way. You know what I mean? So sometimes it makes sense to do that if like if you don't have that much information. It's fine to do something in place. It's fine, but it's frowned upon to mutate data that can be mutated. Okay. 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 So what if I did this? What if I did that? What do you think I would get over here? This is what I would get over here. I would get Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, and then here it says in the sideways carrots. I don't know the less. Oh yeah, the less than and greater than sign. It says 6 empty items, and then it says Smeagol. So if you assign something at an index of an array that is way past beyond, there will be indexes in between. They will just hold nothing. They will be null. Okay? So now, if I say console log hobbits at 6, oh, it's undefined, not null, sorry. You got undefined. But like, if I do dot lengths, well, actually, that's the same thing, huh? As before. But the length is 11, you see? I don't know why you would ever want to do that, but like, you can do that, okay? This would probably cause more bugs than be actually helpful. Does that make sense? So just be wary of that. It's not like if you do it by accident. Like, you know, if you say, like for the slice method, if you say go on until index 100, but there's like 3 indexes, and it'll just copy the whole string, and it'll just stop at the end. This won't. This will actually make 90 whatever extra indexes in the array, okay? Just be wary of that. So, any questions? So the cool thing about arrays is, like, you know how strings you can do dot to uppercase, dot to lowercase, dot index of, dot whatever. There's a lot of array methods as well. Some of them are actually the same as strings, and they work the same way too. So dot index of works the same way. If I do console, let me bring hobbits down here. So you guys can see. So if I say console.log hobbits.index of Sam, oh, what the hell? Oh, my bad. So I have to do hobbits.index of Sam, you get 1. This is looking for that whole thing. If I do AA, you get -1, because there is nothing in the array that matches that. Does that make sense? Any questions? Cool. So, this works. There's also another method that's the same, and it is hobbits. Well, I'll do console.log hobbits.slice of 2. You get Merry and Pippin, right? Hobbits.slice of 1 to 2. You get Sam. Start at 1, include that, and then stop at 2. Don't include them. So you get Sam. slice. Now this is the important thing. This is where, you know how I said that it's frowned upon to mutate arrays, mutate the original array. A very, very quick way to make a copy of that array is to just do slice of nothing, because slice returns a copy of that array. So if I did let hobbits 2 equal hobbits dot slice, and I console.log hobbits 2, you see I get the exact same thing, but I get false. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why is this false? Why is hobbits not triple equals to hobbits 2? And this is a topic that we will be covering on Monday. Well, actually not with me, because Thursday's the last day. But that will be covered Monday when you guys learn about value versus reference, okay? When I say making a copy of this array, that means that we are no longer talking about this array. We're making a brand new array, which is at a different point in memory, okay? That's what I mean by reference. What we're actually comparing here in hobbits is triple equal to hobbits 2 is because arrays are complex, it's actually comparing the references, not the actual data inside, it's the reference. The reference, because these two are referencing different points in memory. I won't go too far into that right now because that is a big enough topic for an entire lecture, okay? But just know if you try to do like this is false, okay? This is false. An empty array is not equal to an empty array because they are talking about different things in different places. Whereas when you compare a string and a string, you're just comparing the actual value. But this is not, okay? You don't have to worry about that right now. But just know that this is false, okay? So, slice is a good way to make a copy. So then if you wanted to change what index 2 was, you wouldn't actually be affecting hobbits, you'd be affecting hobbits 2. Okay? Any questions? Yeah.
What if you just did hobbits 2 equals to hobbits?
So this is getting into Monday's lecture, but I will show you something right now. So let's say if hobbits 2 let's say I did hobbits 2 equals hobbits, like that, right? So if I do this, and I do hobbits at 0 equals null. And then I'll do console.log hobbits console.log hobbits 2. Even though I changed the value in hobbits, in regular hobbits, hobbits 2 also got affected. Once again, let's not talk about this now because this is a big topic. There's a reason why this is happening. But before we get there, I want you guys to get more familiar with working with arrays, okay? But just be careful. And this is why you kind of would never like set like a new array equal to the old one, you know, because like they forget about it. Forget about it. Right? Forget about it. So now I want to talk about some actual array methods that are going to be very, very useful, okay? These aren't for strings, these aren't for anything, these are for arrays, okay? So let's say you have hobbits, right? You got these hobbits. And let's say you wanted to add something, right? You don't do plus equals. You don't like a string. You don't do plus equals this value, right? So this is what you're going to do. You do hobbits.push Smeagol. And we see Smeagol at the end. That is what .push does. Push takes the array, and whatever you pass into here, it just puts it, it adds one index and puts that value at the end. Okay? Push also returns a value. Push also let what is this equal to that, console log what is this, and we get 5. It returns the length of the new array after it puts it in. Okay? Yes? So when you say, so you know how you do like dot to uppercase or something, like a method for a string, right? You just do that thing, that variable dot this, and then this will happen, right? So you do this array dot push, open parentheses, and then you can put whatever you want in that parentheses, because arrays can hold every type of data, right? You can put a boolean in there, you can put a string, you can put an array, doesn't matter. What will happen is that it will then make a new index and put that value here. But push actually returns something, right? It's not going to return the array like slice. Slice will return a copy, right? What push does is actually returns the new length. So you don't really, unless you really need this for some reason, you wouldn't set a variable to something .push. You would really just push it in like in a for loop. Like, if this is true, it's not push. Continue, it's not push. Continue, it's not push. You know what I mean? And if there's a push, there's got to be a pop, right? Right? And this we get Pippin, okay? So what is actually happening here? Array hobbits, array.pop, don't pass anything into there because it doesn't matter. It takes the last element in the array and pops it off. And then it returns that element. So now what is this is equal to the last element. And if I console.log hobbits, you see it's Frodo, Sam, and Merry. I mutated the array. Push and pop are mutating arrays, which is fine, okay? Any questions? Push, you push something into the back. Pop, you take that thing that's at the back off and throw it away, okay? But this is just at the back, right? So what about the front? We've got some stuff for that too. Hobbits.shift. Oh wait, no. Hobbits.unshift Bilbo. Console.log hobbits. So you see, Bilbo is now at the front of the array. You use unshift like push. Unshift puts it at the front of the array. It's the same thing as push, except opposite sides. And to get that first thing off, we would do hobbits.shift. And you would see we took out Frodo, and now the first thing is Sam. Shift and unshift are opposites. Okay? Shift takes the first thing off of the array. Unshift puts something in front of the array. Push puts something in the back of the array. Pop takes the back thing off of the array. Who's got questions? This is a memorization kind of thing. You have to remember to do that because these are actually extremely, extremely, extremely useful methods, okay? You'll be using this a lot. Do you have a question? Sure. Does anyone else have a question? Yeah. Yeah, the first one.
So then, if you do unshift, you just like numbers
No. Unshift, you pass in a variable.
okay,
It's the same thing as push. Unshift, you have to put something inside of the parentheses, and whatever that thing is, gets thrown on.
So for pop and shift, you need them brackets in the middle.
For pop and shift, yes, you need empty brackets. So, like, let's say I wanted to do. Let's say I was like, let last hobbit equal hobbits dot pop, and then I could do hobbits dot unshift last hobbit, and then I could do console dot log hobbits. So now you could see Pippin. What I did here is I said this variable is going to be equal to the return value of hobbits.pop. Hobbits.pop does not return the length like push does. Hobbit.pop returns the element you're popping off. So Pippin is now last hobbit, right? But Pippin was also in that same process taken off of hobbits. Okay? And then on the very next line, I say hobbits.unshift. So now I'm going to put something in the beginning of the array, and I'm saying that's last hobbit. You can pass a variable into here as well, because variables are basically just like placeholders for real values, and the real value of this is a string called Pippin. String of Pippin. Capital P-I-P-P-I-N. Okay? And that is going to put it at the front of the array, like you see here. Does that make sense? Yeah. Last hobbit is a variable that I'm declaring right now, and it's going to be used to hold the thing that you're popping off of hobbits. So then, if anywhere after line 60, I can access last hobbit, and it will always be Pippin, unless I reassign last hobbit. Unless somewhere down the line, I'm like, last hobbit is now equal to the 5. You know? Any other questions? Yeah,
But last hobbit is a string, not an array.
no, exactly. Last hobbit is not an array with one value. Last hobbit is the value at the last index. If that value was an array, then it would be an array. Because you can have arrays and arrays. We'll talk more about nested arrays. That's what we call nested, like something inside of itself. We'll talk more about nested arrays tomorrow, okay? So, then there's some other cool methods. So you could do like console.log hobbits.reverse. And this just reverses the thing for you. Pretty cool, huh? Now everything is backwards. That's so cool, right? And then there's another one that is also a string method. Okay, this one's also This one's also a string method, okay? It's we could do hobbits. Wait. I'll console.log it. Hobbits.includes Frodo. And it says true. Basically, anything you pass to the .includes method, it will go through that array and just return if it's there or not. It's sort of like index of, because index of returns -1 if it's not there. but returns any other number if it is there. But this just returns true or false, two values. You don't get like a multiple values. It's just true or false. Does that make sense? Any questions before I go into the slides and repeat everything I just said again? Any other questions? Nothing? 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 Okay. Who thinks arrays are scary? Don't be afraid. Arrays are dope, okay? Arrays are kind of cool, and they're really easy to work with. In my opinion, arrays are easier to work with than strings. Usually when I solve problems, when I solve like brute force just like do it the way that I feel most comfortable, not the most optimized way, and let's say I'm working with a string, I usually make it an array of characters, and you can do that, okay? Just saying, arrays are very useful. So, without further ado, we'll jump into this thing, this lecture, the slides, provided by Fullstack. It's going to be sad leaving you guys on Thursday. I know you guys don't care, but I care about you guys. Arrays 1. So we're going to talk about what an array is, type of an array, array.isArray, bracket access and bracket assignment, the length property, and basic methods, okay? Cool. So what is an array? An array is a list-like data structure in JavaScript. So let numbers, 1, 2, 3, open bracket, 1, comma, 2, comma, 3, close bracket. This is the syntax of an array of three things, okay? The things have to have commas in between them. Careful when you're writing literally writing every value in an array. Careful not to put the comma in the string, okay? I've done that before. It's like a weird buzz, you know? So here we have let names equal an array of names, George, John, and Thomas. Let a variable equal a value. Let mixed bag equal 30, true, apples, no, a variable. This is all possible because arrays can hold multiple things of different values, okay? That's why they're so useful. So, what is the type of an array? Let names, George, John, Thomas, console.log, type of names, and we get object. Like I said, this could be confusing, because let's say you're checking for, it's really, because like there will never be a type of array, but let's say you're checking for, specifically, you're looking for objects, right? You're looking for an object, and you don't want arrays. Then, since this actually returns object, there could be problems, right? So, we have the array.isArray method. So, you have let names is equal to this, an array of three things, an array of the string George, comma, John, comma, Thomas. At index 0 it's George, at index 1 it's John, and at index 2 it's Thomas. And then if you console.log array, capital A, like the global object of numbers and Boolean and string, right? It's the same thing. Array dot is array, and then you pass that thing inside of that parentheses, something that you want to check. So we'll pass names into that, and then we'll also do the same thing down here, but we're just going to pass in a string. I am not an array. And it's just a string value. You get true and false. Easy Booleans, right? One value or the other. 1 or 0. Okay? True or false. Any questions on isArray? Any questions? Okay. So, accessing elements in an array, you could do it the same way that you'd access a character in a string, using brackets and the index number corresponding to the position of the element inside of the array. So, if we have names, George, John, and Thomas, and we get names of 0, we're going to get George. If we do names at 1, we're going to get John. And if we get names at 2, we're going to get Thomas. And if we get names at 3, we're going to get undefined. Because there is nothing at the third index. It has a length of 3, but the last index is 2, right? Correct? So if we try to access at index 3, we get undefined because there's just nothing there. It's not that long. It doesn't matter. Okay? Questions? Questions on accessing elements in an array? Anyone? Awesome. Huh? Someone had a question? Yeah, what's up?
Learn to access multiple elements in an array. Like,
You would have to slice it off.
that's all.
Yeah, you just have to slice it. Because you can't do like array this, then you just get one number, right? So to get like multiple things, you would do the slice method. You slice off like from this index to this index, just like a string. Okay? Good question. Any other questions? Cool. So, to assign something, use brackets and the assignment operator to assign new values to an index positions in an array. Okay? So you have let names equals George, John, Thomas, again. Names at 0 is now going to be Washington. Names at 1 is now going to be Adams, and names 2 is going to be Jefferson. So when you console log names, you get Washington, Adams, Jefferson. The array is different. All the values are different now. You cannot do this with strings. Okay? This is new. You can do this with arrays. Any questions? Cool. Remember in an earlier lecture we said only complex types can be mutated. I don't know if I said that in an earlier lecture, but I definitely said it in this lecture. Changing the elements in an array is an example of mutating a value. We can't mutate a string in the same way. So as you can see, I'm saying I have an array of just every index is one letter. And it's B-R-A-C-E. And then the string brace, right? And then I'm saying array at 0 is now going to be G. I'm going to change that into Grace. And then I'm also saying string at 0 is now going to be G. And I'm going to try and change the string into Grace. But we can't do that. The array gets updated with the G, but the string does not, okay? It just doesn't work like that. So don't try, because this just like won't work. Does that make sense? All right. So the dot length property, arrays like strings have a length property. So this length is 3. It goes, honestly, it goes by the commas, right? So we have one thing, then you hit a comma, so that was 1. You hit a comma, that was 2. You hit the bracket at the end, that's the third thing. You get 3 things. Very simple, right? Simple, right? The length is simple. The length is simple. So now we'll talk about some of the methods I showed you at the end of my little thingamajig. So dot push takes one or more elements and adds them to the end of the array. Dot push returns the new length of the array. I showed you it returns something and it's not the value you pushed in. It returns the length of the array after it pushes in those values, okay? So let names equal George John Thomas, and I'm going to say let new length equal to names dot push James. And then I'm going to say console.log names, and I'm going to say console.log new length. Names is has James at the end, and the new length is 4. I'm saying let new length equal. I'm assigning new length a variable, right? I'm assigning it a value. I'm declaring a variable new length, and I'm going to say, okay, what am I going to assign? JavaScript sees this, and it says, okay, it's going to be an array of await dot push this. So now we have to wait for this thing to put that thing in the array, and then return the length of the new array. So that's why when we console log names here, James is added and we get 4. Does that make sense? Okay. The pop method, pop removes one element from the end of the array and it returns the removed element. So let Jefferson dot equal to names dot pop. And then we'll console log names. You see Thomas is no longer in that array. But we captured that element by saying let Jefferson equal to names dot pop. And you don't pass anything into pop. Push, you push something into the back of the array, and pop, you take the last thing off. Pop it off. Okay? Don't get it twisted. Alright? This shift method. Shift works like pop, but it removes the first element instead. It's called shift because the indices for every element in the array are shifted over by 1. Makes sense, right? Now, if you put something in the front of the array, everything's indexed before will be 1 more. Whereas if you push something to the back of the array, everything before that stays exactly the same. All its indexes are exactly the same. You're just adding 1 more at the end. But here, you're shifting everything over by 1. Right? So George John Thomas, let Washington equal names.shift. Oh, I'm sorry. Shift, you take everything off. Shift is the other one. You take it off, and then everything shifts 1 this way. Okay? My bad. Unshift is the other one. So console.log names, console.log Washington, you get John, Thomas, and George, right? So what we're saying here is let Washington, we're going to set that equal to this array, dot shift. Don't pass anything into shift. Shift is like pop, okay? You don't pass anything into it. But Washington is now going to be equal to that first value, not in an array form, the actual value, okay? Unless this wasn't. So George is now going to be equal to Washington. But when we console log names, you see that George is gone. And everything got shifted over 1 place. So pop would not affect any of these elements. If we did dot pop, George and John would stay the same. Shift actually moves everything over. Okay? How do you guys feel? Not bad. Decent. This is like these methods. These methods are all like memorization. You know, you just gotta like remember what they do. And if you don't remember what they do, you can just look it up. Okay? Go to MDN and it will tell you everything you need to know about a method. How many arguments it takes, what the expected result is, like examples of using them. You know, you could do like .unshift JavaScript MDN, and it's the first result on Google. Okay? So if you can't remember, you can always Google it. Unshift adds 1 or more elements to the front of the array. Let names equal George John Thomas. Let new length equal names.unshift King George III. Console.log names, console.log new length. So we get King George III inside of names now, except it's at the front. But just like push, it returns a value, and it's the length of the new array. Any questions on this? Push onto the back, pop off from the back, shift off from the front, unshift into the front. Okay? Does anyone have any questions? Please. Just yell them at me. Please. Sure. Okay. Okay. Alright. The index of method, just like strings, it works the same way. So let names George John Thomas, console.log names.index of George, of Alexander. You get 0 because George is at index 0. Well, now we're looking for Alexander. It's not in here, so we get -1. Works the same way as the string method .index of. Okay? And then the slice method is also an array method. So you learned about it for strings, now here it is for arrays. It works the same way as well. So if we do let one term precedence is equal to names.slice of 1 and 2, slice, remember, starts, we give it a start index, and it includes the element at that index, which would be John, right? 0, 1. Include John, and then it tells you where to end, at 2. But we don't include that one, so all we get is John. And as you can see, this does not alter the original array, which is important and will be important. Maybe not right now for you guys, but it will be important. Okay? Any questions? Yeah.
Why is 1 and 2 correlated with George and Thomas?
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, you're putting George, John, Thomas into it, and then you're using as to tell the function to tell the I don't know, to tell what the slice numbers one and numbers 2. How does that correlate to? How is that connected to George and Thomas rather than like George and John?
It's not correlated to George and Thomas at all.
Oh, what's happening?
So names is an array of 3 things, right?
Yeah.
And then one term precedence, I'm saying names is going to be equal to that array dot slice, start at 1, end at 2. Start at index 1, end at index 2. Start at index 1, John, end at index 2, don't include that index. So you just get John, you see?
Oh, okay, I get it.
So when you console log one term precedence, and notice that this, even though you're plucking off one thing, right? Like you can do that with strings too, to get one character, right? You guys remember that? That was a string. You can get one index, but it's still going to be an array. It's not going to be the value, it's going to be the array. And then when you console log names, names is unchanged. Names is still the same, okay?
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Anyone else have any questions on this? Okay. Didn't I just do this? Okay, yeah, so this could be useful if you wanted to keep the old thing, but you wanted to push in some value or do something else that mutates the original, right? So you could say, let names copy is names.slice, don't pass anything into it. Because if you give slice no arguments, it starts at the beginning and ends at the end. But we know that it returns a copy. So then if we say names copy at 2 is now going to be equal to Paul, and then we're going to push in Ringo, and we console log names and names copy, we have the original names, George, John, and Thomas, but now we're changing Thomas at index 2 to Paul, and we're pushing in Ringo. Does that make sense? And I showed you before that if I just said names copy is equal to names, both would be altered. Okay? So if you ever are in a situation where you want the original values, but you want to add 1 or 2, but not keep the other ones the same, dot slice and passing nothing into it is a good way to go about it. Okay? Because it returns the exact same array except copy. Any questions? Nah? Okay. So the dot includes method. Dot includes takes a value and returns true if the value is in an element in the array. It literally works the same way as index of, but instead of returning indexes or -1 if it's not there, it returns true if it is there. If you don't need the index, you just want to know if it's there. It returns true, and if it's not, it returns false. So names dot includes George, names dot includes Alexander. George is in this array. It's at index 0. It doesn't return 0. It returns true. Alexander's not in here, so it returns false. Easy, right? And it makes sense. Names dot, does it include the thing you're going to pass into it? The same can be used for strings. This is also a string method. Then we have the reverse method. Reverse actually mutates the original array and reverses the order. It reverses the order of its elements. So if we do names.reverse, console.log names, we get Thomas, John, George. That's all you have to do. This dot reverse, don't pass anything into it, okay? So we talked about what an array is, what its type of, the isArray method off the global array object, bracket access, bracket assignment, the length property, which you guys know already, length, easy, easy. And then we got basic methods, okay? So, like I said, dot reverse JavaScript MDN. Ooh, what's this? Ignore the prototype word. Don't be afraid of that. You just click this. You have a demo right here, 1, 2, and then we're going to console.log a string and then array 1. So array expected output would be 1, 2, 3. Oh, why? But then we have reversed array 1 should be 3, 2, 1, right? Careful, reverse is destructive. It also changes the original array. It's a pretty crazy way to put it. Destructive. And the syntax is just a an array or whatever dot reverse. Return value the reversed array. So use when in doubt, if you can't remember something, use MDN. If you can't remember what it takes, what it returns, use MDN. Okay, it's very, very helpful. Any questions before you guys take a break? Take a break for like, I'll give you guys 10 minutes. No, I'll give you 5 minutes. Wait, do you guys want 10 minutes? You guys want 5 minutes? Okay. Are there any questions? Okay, take 6 minutes and then come back.